All right. Very good morning, everyone. We are, thanks everyone for joining the partner call. Shiva has just started the call and he'll be sharing the screen and taking us through some product updates. So Shiva, that said, over to you. Thank you. Yeah, we can see your screen, Shiva. We can start.
So, perfect. So, good morning, everyone. So, we've been kind of working in the back end for the past couple of weeks, and so I'm glad to meet all of you here today. There are some key updates that I basically wanted to present today, and basically this is uh, based on a commitment that I had made this thing. The first thing is basically the on-prem release. So the on-prem release is ready, and we are basically going to make it available for download shortly. For all folks who basically need the on-prem release, please send us a mail to support@connectsecure.com to start the process. Going forward, basically during the sign-up, people will essentially get the option to choose an on-prem version, but we generally would almost like everyone to use a SaaS version unless there is basically, for example, requirements from a government perspective or any other federal contracts that you have to basically maintain this, because it is just to do with it's difficult to maintain the on-prem versions and basically keep them up to date in terms of patches, etc. But we found a way to do that also basically securely this time, and I'm just going to explain some of those pieces. And once we get basically the requests which are there for all the people who would like to use the on-prem, I will basically have an onboarding session where I'll walk through the entire process of how to set up an on-prem instance and basically use it, because we've created wizards which make it extremely simple to set up the on-prem instance. So it's no longer terminal scripts, etc. So it's very different from the previous version because we are not essentially going to give you a script and then you manage the OS and all of those pieces. So the way that we are doing it this time is that we are giving you a full pre-configured VMware image, or you could basically, if you're going to be loading this in AWS or Azure, we have the images that you can import into AWS or Azure. And eventually, basically, we'll be working towards making this part of the marketplace. So that's going to take some time, probably around 30 to 60 days for us to get into the marketplace. But the VMware images and basically the importable images into AWS and Azure are available right now. Now, the key things that we have basically maintained, and I'm just basically putting this out basically so that it can be very clear to everyone. This unit that you will get, once you basically configure it and once you bring it up, will essentially be what we call as another pod in the architecture. So today, when you go to the product and you go to basically the under your details, you will actually see which pod you belong to. So in a SaaS product, you have a particular pod. So it's pod 501 or pod 103, 104 if you're in the US. So we have pod 100 series for the US. We have 200, which is basically Canada. We have 300, which is Europe. So across the regions, we have different numbering schemes for all the pods. So your on-prem instance will become one more pod in the entire system. So your pod is catering to only one tenant, and so it will be dedicated to you as one tenant. But it is basically going to be a part of a pod in the entire routing architecture. And when we are doing external scans, we will basically not be using your machine because it is simply not possible for us to essentially kind of put so much of load on that particular machine. So your external scans will still basically route to our centralized external scan pods, which we are basically running, and the scans will run from there. So that is basically one thing that you need to keep this thing. So your instance, once you basically create it using the wizard, we will be creating a DNS entry for like each pod, basically. So the standard pod numbers that we use for the SaaS versions are 3-digit numbers, which is pod 101, 102, and 103, etc. for the different locations. So all the 4-digit numbers will essentially be the pod numbers for the on-prem instances. So once we look at a pod number, we'll know whether it's an on-prem instance or it is basically a SaaS instance. Now, this particular 4-digit pod number .myconnectsecure.com will be essentially a DNS entry that we will be putting in our site based on your external IP address. and we will require your machine to have a static IP address, or you'll have to enable Dyn DNS on your machine. We will basically run a Dyn DNS server on it, but you will have to allow us to essentially run Dyn DNS on it in case you basically cannot provide a static IP. So once you provide that, this basically entry will be set up, and all the agents will be using this a host entry to essentially kind of route into your particular instance. And the reason for this is because, see, we cannot hard code any domain names, etc. So we have a global lookup service where the agent goes and looks up saying that, okay, I'm this agent and I belong to this particular domain and I belong to this particular pod. So tell me, where should I send the data to? And it has to get a domain name. So if we keep this as internal domain names or domain names that are not globally routable, then the agent will not be able to send data to the location. So you will basically have to allow us to have this routing, which will be taking place. And the second thing is that the UI will be served from our CDN. So basically, if you really look at it, what is happening is that your entire the API layer, all the microservices, all of the databases, everything is sitting on the machine, but the UI is getting served out of the edge. So this is also going to be an advantage for you, because the load of all the UI and serving out all the UI and basically sucking up your bandwidth will basically not be there, because only the APIs will get called and the data is going to get rendered from the edge from our Cloudflare CDN that we already have. So, and this also basically ensures that your on-prem installation is lockstep and is basically exactly compatible with the SaaS version of the product. So this is essentially how we've designed it. So that is basically one of the key items that we were working on. And last but not the least, for your domain, you can basically use the custom domain. So once you configure your domain, so whatever is your domain, you can customize it and you will be able to use it. Now, part two, the immediate question is, I have all this on-prem version, but basically this thing. The thing that we are working on, which will be ready in the next 60 to 90 days, which we are working on, is the ability for you to white label the complete agent. So it will no longer say CyberCNS agent or ConnectSecure agent, and you can essentially have your company name agent.exe. So that complete white labeling is something that we are putting together. Ability to essentially design your own front login page is basically something that we are putting together, because we are removing the standard login pages provided by the auth provider, and we are going to be able to provide custom login pages. So you can essentially put your own content in the login page and basically change the whole thing. Third is that in the internal screens, we already provide ability for you to customize the colors and all of those pieces and the logo right now. We are also looking at any other customized, putting a panel on the right-hand side where you can put your customized content. So these three pieces are customizations that we are working on across both SaaS and on-prem. So that way, both the versions can essentially have this particular set of features. So these are things that we are going to be working on basically as part of this overall. When we did this on-prem release, we realized that these all things could be required. And that is where we've essentially put this in the list of features that need to be done in the next 60 to 90 days. And this is essentially available now. So as I said, for all the people who want to essentially use the on-prem version, please send a mail to support@connectsecure.com. And as soon as we receive the mails, we'll bunch it up, and then we will basically respond back to you with the prerequisites and basically a link to the image that you can download along with instructions. My only request is, if possible, please download the image. And then once we get the instructions, I'll actually send out a mail where we can have a onboarding session. And we will have one person from our team basically walk through the entire process of the setup. Please go through that onboarding session and then set it up so that you don't have any hiccups. And if you have any hiccups, we can basically solve it during that call itself. And then once you get set up, then we are good to go. So there is basically like a 5-step wizard that we basically have to go through. And once all of those steps are done, then basically we are in good shape to basically use that image. Okay. So that is the first one. Second one is that.
Can I ask questions about what you just stated?
Yes.
So you've identified in the number 3 here that these are VMware images, but what if our hypervisor is in VMware?
So let us know what. See, the way we are distributing an OVF this thing, which is basically can be opened either in KVM, or it can be in Hyper-V or in VMware. So let us know what your hypervisor is, and then we'll run a test and basically validate it, but nothing
Okay,
else.
it's Hyper-V. And then the second question is, since we're setting up a new image, I assume this 5-step process or whatever, you're accounting for the migration of existing data that's in version 3 to version 4 image that's being deployed, correct?
So once you basically set up the system, that's when you can essentially initiate a migration. And
Okay.
again, there is a migration wizard that's put into that system. So once you've set up your system and you're into the system, you can then basically say, I want to migrate from an existing instance, and then it will basically pull the data from that particular system.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. The second thing is that, like, I think there was a post on Reddit or somewhere which basically said that our Mac binaries are not fine and etc. And then we basically kind of went in and we basically looked at the whole thing, and then we spoke with Apple. And Apple basically said only one thing. They said, yeah, your binaries are fine, but the problem is that we've stopped accepting binaries as a method of distribution. And what you need to do is to basically create a package file and basically distribute everything as a package file, and you'll be good. Because although your binary is signed, we would like you to basically get this whole thing as a package file. So right now, what we've done is that we've been able to create this whole thing as a package file, and this package file is basically completely signed. So you can essentially see that this is a signed version of the package file, and it is completely whitelisted from Apple perspective. So when you basically run install from this package, you will essentially no longer get any warnings or any of those pieces. And this has essentially gone through the Apple certification process. So we are actually certified from an Apple developer perspective. And we basically are providing you with these binaries, which are technically safe, but they were always safe. But you could, so one of the things that was brought out in one of those Reddit posts was that you could do side loading. You cannot do
What
side.
about now? Can you hear me?
Pardon?
You can hear me now. No, it was me. Hold on. Let me get out of that call.
Okay. So you cannot basically do any side loading because we do not allow for any external scripts to be loaded. We do not allow for any external executables to be loaded. And the entire code, which is written in Golang, basically does not accept any external scripts, nor do we download any external scripts from anywhere, because all of it basically is part of basically the code. So in Golang, there is a mechanism to create a virtual file system within Golang. So all of our scripting, all of the scripts that we need to run essentially becomes part of the binary itself. And so you cannot essentially create anything into the file system after the Golang executable has been created, published, and basically the MD5 checksum has been put into place. So the concept of basically side loading does not exist for our executable. So this is basically something that we've done so that it alleviates any of the concerns that people have. And apart from that, basically during the normal course of whatever we're doing, there are a lot of requests which are coming in terms of, so there are a couple of things which I want to point out that we have done a major overhaul of basically the remediation and problems pages. So you should see better performance on those pages. And this was done a couple of weeks back. And we've actually seen that people complaining about that has significantly come down. And the performance issues are getting better. We are also basically implementing a few more caching mechanisms that will essentially make the performance almost 3x or 5x better in the next week or so. So you should essentially see better performance happening in the next couple of weeks, where you will see pages loading much faster. The goal that we are having is that every page should basically load in under 3 seconds. So we will basically get it to that state so that basically you don't waste time in pages loading, etc. But also please realize that there is a lot of data that we're bringing together in each of the screens that we're putting together, because we are not basically just dumping data in terms of, so when you say a remediation, right, it basically pulls what is the software, what are the assets that are in there, and brings it all together into one single view. So when it's trying to bring all of that together, it takes some time. So we're using caching and intelligent querying for basically solving some of those issues. And we also have basically improved the performance of the database to bring these things to the fore. And then there was basically a question about the ability to enable or disable audit events, basically like pulling up our audit events, which was being done by default for lightweight agents and probes, etc. This basically has been provided. So you can essentially choose to enable or disable it whenever you want to do it. And again, basically people ask for things like deleting multiple companies, etc. So those features have been added, and basically deleting companies is basically not a simple task. So we basically have jobs. So you can essentially see whether every company has been deleted from the system. And then we basically have the ability for you to upload like bulk upload CSVs for external scans, so that you don't need to essentially kind of enter these things like one by one. In case you have a CSV, you can basically upload a CSV, and we provided a template. So that basically is part of this. And then one of the key features that we are basically going to be releasing by the end of this week is, you know that we basically earlier used to support the suppression of vulnerabilities for Microsoft patches. Now you have the ability to choose whether you want the suppression of vulnerabilities for Microsoft or for all of the software, and you can choose which software you want to have it and which software you don't want to have it. So you will be able to basically kind of suppress vulnerabilities for all software, and everything is based on the date of release of the vulnerability. So if a vulnerability is released today, and you essentially define that I want to basically suppress it for, say, 15 days. So till 15 days, that vulnerability will not be shown in the UI, but it will essentially show up in the auto-suppressed vulnerabilities. So we have a separate field which is called auto-suppressed, and it will show up in the auto-suppressed. So in case you want to basically look at it, you can have a look at it, but it will not show up in the vulnerabilities page. It will not reflect on the counts and all of those pieces. So that basically has been added. So this helps in kind of your reports, etc., will basically be much cleaner when you essentially have to deliver it to your customer. And again, we basically have the ability for you to choose one or more tags for all of these standard reports that you're downloading. So you can essentially download reports basically based on a specific tag. So again, this allows you to basically partition your network. You can basically say that these are all production machines, these are all these machines, and only for those machines essentially download the reports. So that in summary has been the work that we've done for the last couple of weeks. We've been focusing heavily on getting the on-prem version out, because that was a commitment that we made, and we needed to meet that commitment. So I'm happy that we could meet that commitment, and thanks to all of you for keeping us basically honest in this whole thing. Okay. Alan, as suggested, let's get into onboarding call. And second is that if you need basically somebody from our engineering team to help you out, please basically reach out to us, and we'll basically be happy to help. Chris, I think the question of VMware has been addressed. Okay, I saw the release notes as being this thing. Is the way to default the number of lines for displays to more than 5? Yes, we can. So
Asked and answered.
yeah. Can we group vulnerabilities to issues in V4 similar to V3? So, the main thing is that the solutions view is basically the grouping of vulnerabilities into solutions. So that's where you can see all of those. So I think the solutions view is the view that you're looking for. So Steve agreed. So we'll basically convert everything into remediations. I think the solutions word is not resonating with a lot of people. So this is fine. So I see an integration with the Cloud Radial logo. So we basically have the ability to push our push data into Cloud Radial, and I will basically allow my the team to basically kind of get in touch with you, Enrique, and basically talk about what the cloud Radial integration does. It's basically quite detailed. What country is the CDN hosted in? No, it is, so Jerry, it is not it is basically not a single location, right? So it is basically located all over the world. So Jerry, in your case, if you have a specific reason to basically get the UI hosted on your machine, we will support that. We have the ability to basically push the UI on your machine, but it is just that it becomes difficult for us to. So when changes happen on the user interface, we have to basically push those user interface files to you, which means that you have to essentially help us by opening up the ports to basically be able to push those patches in, or you should basically be able to go in and update those patches on your own. So that's the only reason that we are doing that. When we say basically the CDN is hosted, the way that CDN works is that they have all of the edge locations where they basically replicate the data to. And from wherever you log in, the UI basically is served from there, but there is no data on the UI as such, right? Because the UI is only basically a set of JavaScript files of this thing. It only is the shell of the div. The data is coming through the API, and the API is basically there on your machine. And the API is talking to the database, which is again back in your machine. So there is no nothing else that essentially is coming back. So
I would imagine one of his concerns is simply now his data, while stored on his server, is being routed through potentially regions or countries, while maybe being routed in a secure fashion or going through regions and countries that don't adhere to regulatory items or something like that. But then from my own personal perspective would be, one of the advantages of having like a self-contained on-prem instance is that if you guys fall into financial problems or something of those natures, or you have some type of problem with your CDN, my stuff continues to work and I still have access to it. That was one of my big goals for remaining on-premise, so my stuff potentially still works even though you guys are not working. And so now with it being a mixed, we still rely on the CDN network. It calls into question, other than benefits of data locality, the benefits of having on-prem at all. That's where I come from mostly.
So Chris, I will take this into advice along with Jerry. So I don't think we have a problem. Okay, here is how it'll be, right? I don't have a problem in basically pushing down the user interface files into your system and basically making it serve out of that system. So let me make this change and basically get back to you within the next 24 to 48 hours. And then we will basically see how it works. The only thing is that, see, the point is that, like we've seen as with certain customers, what happens is that when people start accessing the user interface from different locations, etc., and then when the bandwidth bills go high, then people get a little concerned and they keep coming back to us saying that, why am I getting such a high bandwidth bill? Which is
I own an internet service company, so my bandwidth is free.
Okay, perfect. So then we'll work on that and we'll close it.
So, but the only other concern that I would have then is, I don't want to, as you guys grow and become successful, necessarily be like a one-off situation for you guys and eventually turn into a pain in your ass because I'm different than everybody else either, though. You know what I mean? So.
No, see, you've given us feedback. So when I do it, I will not do it only for you. So any on-prem instance will basically have the UI locally hosted. I'll make that change. So then it won't be a problem.
As long as there's other partners that desire that same thing. Like I said, I don't want to, my goal isn't to be a one-off unicorn or anything like that to where you're catering just to my sole needs. But if there's other partners that have the same feelings and same, wants out of this product, then by all means, I would welcome it.
So you have already two friends on the group who basically have echoed your sentiment. So one is Jerry Johnson and the other is Henry Overton. And both of them who have been the long-time partners for this. So absolutely, you're in good company. So we'll make this change. Perfect. So I think we've covered all of the items there. Let me look, there's one more message. I would be interested in local 2 for GDPR compliance. Danny, really GDPR would not come into this place, but as I said, since basically locality of the this thing, we will make this change and give it to you. It's not going to take a lot of, it's not going to change the timelines very well, probably under 24 hours, but we'll basically finish that and basically hand off those images to you. So perfect. Thanks you all for your time today, and basically looking forward to seeing you next week. And please keep the feedback coming in, and we love your feedback, and we like to basically work on things and make it better. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Shiva. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.